All right, thank you for your patience. I have a few notes to share with you on other items. The Secretary General is in Dili in Timor-Leste today, where earlier today he met with Prime Minister Xanana Gusmão. In a joint press encounter, the Secretary General said Timor-Leste won the battle for independence and it won the battle for democracy, and that as Secretary General of the UN, he's proud that the UN stood by the people of Timor-Leste in their struggle for independence and in the consolidation of democracy. However, he added that the country now must win the battle for development and that the United Nations stands ready by the people to support them and the government in this effort. The Secretary General also visited the Timorese Resistance Archive and Museum, where he saw an exhibit on the role of women in the resistance. He later took part in a panel discussions with both the Prime Minister Ramos Horta and the President Ramos Horta and the Prime Minister Xanana Gusmão. Tomorrow he will address the National Parliament and attend an official ceremony to mark the 25th anniversary of the popular consultation. From there he will head to Singapore and then on to China. Our Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed, as you know, is in Port Sudan. She just finished her day there. She was accompanied by Ramtan Lamamra, the personal envoy for Sudan, as well as the resident coordinator for Sudan, Clementine Nkweta Salami, and senior officials from the World Food Programme, UNHCR, and UNICEF. They met with displaced persons. They also met with the UN team and with a number of government officials of Sudan. All of this was done in Port Sudan. As you know, this is aimed at highlighting the humanitarian crisis ongoing in the country. Tomorrow, the Deputy Secretary General and her team will head to Adre in Chad, which is the border point from which we've been getting some humanitarian aid into Sudan. And just on Sudan itself, just an impact first on the floods triggered by the collapse of the Arba Dam just near Port Sudan that took place last Sunday. Our humanitarian colleagues note there's been extensive damage among other things, to the freshwater pipeline that supplies the city of Port Sudan. Local authorities also report that some 5 million cubic meters of silt have been released downstream, severely impacting agriculture and water supplies in the surrounding areas. Urgent needs for people affected by the dam burst include food, include shelter, and household items. We, along with our partners, are mobilized and have been distributing emergency assistance. Our humanitarian colleagues warn that the damage to the dam has had serious direct impact that will continue to affect the fresh water supply in Sudan Port Sudan for the months to come. For its part, World Food Programme said today it is working around the clock to try to deliver food and other humanitarian goods to people throughout Sudan. WFP's priority is to provide vital aid across 14 areas in the country to people who are either facing famine or at risk of slipping into famine after 500 relentless days of conflict. WFP pointed out that since Chad's Adre border crossing with Sudan was reopened for humanitarian convoys, the food agency trucks carrying over 630 metric tons of food, that's about enough for 55,000 people, have crossed into Darfur region. The latest truck crossing was on Tuesday. WFP says that this food assistance is for communities in Kirenek and Sirba, two areas that are at risk of famine in West Darfur. Some supplies have already arrived in Mornay town in Kirenek, while other convoys are still en route. WFP says the progress of the convoys has been slowed by damaged bridges as well as flooded and muddy roads, as this is the peak of the rainy season in Sudan approaches. About trucks carrying about 11,134 metric tons of food, that's enough for about 280,000 people, crossed from Chad into Sudan's Darfur region via other border crossing. That's the Tine crossing. That took place on Wednesday and Thursday last week. Distribution of vital food assistance will start as soon as possible in locations across Darfur for communities facing famine or at risk of slipping into famine. WFP said the food assistance had been stranded at the border because of flooded seasonal riverbeds linked to heavy rainfall last year. Floodwaters have receded slightly and allowing trucks to move, though progress remains slow because of poor conditions. WFP is also delivering cash assistance to families across Darfur. And just staying in the region, in South Sudan, our peacekeeping colleagues from the mission tell us that the significant rise in the water levels of the Nile has heightened the need for preparedness, especially in high-risk communities near rivers or swampland. Peacekeepers are helping state authorities to mitigate risk in the wake of extreme flood alerts issued for 5 counties in Jonglei. The UN mission visited Lankiem in Jonglei State along with humanitarian colleagues to assess the impact of the flood and the preparedness operations. They also organized a 2-day workshop for community members in a village to help them identify elevated areas to serve as safe zones. The mission peacekeepers also navigated rising waters to evacuate stranded civilians in Kodok and Upper Nile State, while road access has been cut. Going back to the occupied Palestinian territory, and this time focusing on the West Bank. First, you will have seen last night we issued a statement on behalf of the Secretary General in which he said he was deeply concerned by the latest developments in that area, including the launch of large-scale military operations in Jenin, Tulkarm, and Tubas governorate by the Israeli security forces that involved airstrikes, which resulted in casualties and damage to civilian infrastructure. He strongly condemns the loss of lives, including that of children. The Secretary General said these dangerous developments are fueling an already explosive situation in the West Bank, further undermining the Palestinian Authority. He called for the immediate cessation of these operations. Today, our humanitarian colleagues warned that deadly warfare tactics that seem to exceed international standards for law enforcement are still occurring in the north. The governorates of Jenin, Tulkarm, and Tubas, the number of fatalities, according to what OCHA is receiving, is 15 people in less than 2 days, with many others injured. Initial reports suggest that some families have been displaced, particularly in urban areas where Israeli security forces have repurposed homes as military positions. In multiple locations, heavy damage to infrastructure has been caused by military bulldozers. Electricity and telecom outages are also reported. Meanwhile, there continues to be military operations near hospitals, severely impacting those facilities. An UNRWA clinic at Al-Far refugee camp had to suspend operations yesterday, but was able to resume today once the Israeli security forces left the area. OCHA has convened UN agencies and other UN humanitarian partners working in the West Bank. They stand ready to assess the damage and the people's needs and to respond accordingly. Agencies have also warned people of the risk of unexploded ordnances in some areas, and that will be one of the first issues that will need to be addressed. Meanwhile, on the political end, Tor Veneslan, the special coordinator for the UN in the region, continues to monitor the ceasefire and hostage release negotiations and to engage regularly with key national and international regional actors. He remains in contact with all relevant parties, reiterating the need to urgently reach a deal and the UN's commitment to support all efforts towards this goal. He's also held high-level talks with Israeli security officials regarding the incident involving the WFP vehicle that we told you about yesterday. In his discussions, he continues to raise his serious concerns about the deteriorating dynamics in the occupied West Bank. And as we said yesterday, Israeli forces must adhere to international law enforcement standards. Moving to Gaza, yesterday our WFP colleagues, as you know, decided to temporarily pause the movement of its employees across the Gaza Strip following the shooting of the vehicle. Despite the pause in staff movement, WFP continues its life-saving humanitarian operations in Gaza through cooperating partners and hopes to resume its staff missions as soon as the necessary safety security guarantees from Israeli authorities are received and they feel it is safe to resume the movement of staff. WFP, as you know, is committed to staying and to delivering for the people of Gaza, but the incident is a stark reminder of the rapidly and ever-shrinking humanitarian space for our colleagues. Also, just OCHA is mentioning in Gaza, is telling us in Gaza that Israeli authorities announced that displaced people could return to specific areas in Deir al-Balah. This is the first time where return is officially allowed to an evacuated area. Obviously, the evacuation orders that we've received, that Palestinians have received numerous times since the beginning of August, has severely disrupted our humanitarian work and our ability to work. Also want to flag that Saturday last, UN colleagues assessed the water, hygiene, and sanitation conditions in 2 sites hosting over 1,200 families in Rafah. People there are struggling with drinking water as no trucking is currently available. They report skin diseases being the main morbidity among women and children, with no treatment available when they go to medical points. Also, those residing in the areas near on the beach in Mawasi have had seawater flooding their tents. And just to flag, as you know, this afternoon the Security Council will meet to hear a humanitarian briefing on the area. Joyce Masuya will brief on behalf of OCHA, and Dr. Mike Ryan will also brief on behalf of WHO. I've been asked about the situation in Yemen and the Sunyon oil tanker, and I can tell you that we are encouraged by reports that the salvage operations for the tanker can proceed with tugboats and rescue ships to access the incident areas. This is a necessary step considering the grave risk posed by the fires reported above that tanker, which is, I remind you, carries 150,000 tons of crude oil, and it remains anchored in waters in the Red Sea, and the crew had been evacuated. We commend the ongoing concerted efforts of the international community, including through the work of our special envoy for Yemen, Hans Grunberg, and his engagement to secure the immediate access to the vessel and avert an environmental catastrophe. Once again, we say that Security Council Resolution 2722 and 2739 must be fully respected in their entirety, and we particularly call on the Houthis to immediately cease attacks against all merchant and commercial ships in the Red Sea. Turning to Ukraine, our OCHA colleagues tell us that attacks in the region of Dnipro, Donetsk, and Kharkiv continued yesterday. Local authorities report dozens of casualties, as well as severe damage to homes and civilian infrastructure. Local authorities in the Donetsk region in the east of the country have declared an emergency evacuation as the situation around the town of Pokrovsk becomes increasingly dire due to the continuing fighting. Our humanitarian colleagues say that some 40,000 residents remain in the town. Banks will remain operational until the end of the week, after which only several ATMs will be available. Humanitarian organizations continue to assist people in the frontline communities to provide food, household supplies, and other essential items. They're also doing whatever they can to support people fleeing the fighting in Donetsk and Sumy region. The DRC, our peacekeeping mission there, says that one of their long-range patrols came under fire yesterday by members of the Codeco armed groups. This happened in Bali, which is the northeast of Jugu in the Ituri province of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Peacekeepers repelled the attack, forcing militia members to withdraw. However, we are sad to report that one peacekeeper was wounded. He's now reportedly in stable condition. Later in the day, another patrol deployed to the area to protect civilians, also coming under fire by the same armed group, but no reported casualties. Peacekeepers also deploying in other locations southeast of Jugu to respond to the establishment of 2 new positions by the Codeco armed group in that area. Peacekeepers facilitated the safe passage of local populations. Today is the International Day of Nuclear Test. The UN aims, as you know, to reduce and eventually eliminate nuclear weapons, but until then, the The International Day is a chance to remember the legacy and destruction left behind by nuclear tests and to speak up to end this practice once and for all. The Secretary General highlights that the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty is the only prohibition on all nuclear testing and an essential verifiable security tool, but the treaty is sadly not yet in force. He calls on all countries whose ratifications are needed for the treaty to enter into force to do so immediately and without condition. Sorry. Lastly, programming note, we're going to have a little time change tomorrow. We will brief at 11 a.m. Ooh.
Someone has to change it.
I will not entertain comments on that, but I will entertain questions. Edie.
Two follow-ups, Steph. First, on WFP, you said that they hope to resume when there are safety and security guarantees. Can you tell us what kind of talks are taking place to try and get those guarantees and at what level?
Well, as I mentioned, Tor Venisland met with senior Israeli security officials to discuss the issue. Our security colleagues on the ground are also speaking to their counterparts. As with everything that we do in Gaza, assessments are made on a daily basis, and as soon as WFP feels it's comfortable enough to do so, they will return to moving staff around.
And a second follow-up on Yemen. You said that the UN is encouraged by reports that that salvage operations may start. Do you have any independent confirmation that the Houthis have agreed to this?
I mean, that's our understanding. What we are not involved in the actual salvaging. That's being done by the private sector, but our understanding is that yes, it will be space for these operations to be conducted safely has been agreed to by the Houthis.
And any indication of when that might start?
No, ma'am. Benno.
Thank you. Also, follow up to WFP. So you said we know WFP is kind of replacing their actions through partners. I think you said basically. How able is WFP to do their work right now in comparison with like 3 or 4 days ago?
I mean, night and day, I would say. I mean, if you can't move staff around, you can't move the convoys around, it's hampering. Obviously, they work, WFP, like many UN agencies, work with local partners, so they're supporting them remotely, getting information, but to do the work properly, we need to be able to move staff around.
Wait, you just said when you can't move staff around, you can't move convoys around. So WFP is not...
They're not, WFP vehicles and staff are not moving in Gaza currently, right? They are working with their local partners to do whatever they can remotely, but a lot of the food that WFP receives then goes on, is distributed to local community kitchens and local NGOs.
And that is still done by other partners now?
That is being done by their partners. But obviously it's not working. I mean, WFP is not working at the level it wants to work, and it needs to work in Gaza. Dulcie.
How is Amina Mohammed going to get to the Adre crossing?
She is flying from Addis Ababa to Chad.
Okay, and then she's entering Sudan from the crossing?
As far as I know, she is not entering. She was in Port Sudan. She flew back to Addis Ababa, is overnighting in Addis Ababa, and then flying down she's flying down to Chad to get to Adre tomorrow. Okay, Margaret Bashir.
Steph, in the DRC, where was the peacekeeper from who was killed?
That's information I'm not yet able to share, I think, given all the notifications that have to be done. As soon as I have a nationality, I will share with you.
And then on the Red Sea, following up on Edie, the Houthis gave guarantees previously with the other ship that you guys worked on for 2 years. I mean, and it kept taking so long. because their guarantees never materialized.
I mean,
So how
I think
optimistic
w-
are you?
I think
This will
we
happen?
have, we can only take people at their word, but I think there is an understanding from all the parties involved that this is a live case, as I want to put it. I mean, this is a tanker carrying a lot of crude oil, in which we believe there are fires on board. So it's not, it's a live wire case. You may ask a follow-up, Michelle.
Thank you. On that note, you mentioned Hans Grunberg's
Yeah.
involvement in helping get this agreement. He spoke to the Iranians, I presume, because they are the ones who put out the statement yesterday.
I don't have any confirmation of his contacts with any Iranians. I do know he has spoken to Ansar Allah people. Okay, I think we've all been in this room long enough. No, it's been on for quite a while, but not. Daryl Bala in Gaza. Okay.